Alan Winde has faced the toughest year in his tenure as Western Cape Premier. From a rocky start when he was forced to sack his own community safety MEC Albert Fritz amid allegations of sexual misconduct, to dealing with crime and the effects of load shedding. This year is his last year as Premier. He joins me now to reflect on his term thus far. Mr. Winde, Happy New Year. Appreciate your time today. Now, in that intro, we talked about last year having been the toughest year for you. How accurate is that statement?
Yeah, I think I heard in the segment just before this about the fire in Parliament. Last year we laid the arch to rest. In actual fact, his funeral was the day before, and the next day Parliament burnt down. As you said, I had to dismiss one of my ministers. We were recovering from COVID-19 last year at this time. We were on the red list, still trying to come off the red list, get tourism going again. Suffering, the consequences of 2 years worth of COVID and the impact that had on our economy and the citizens of this province. So, yeah, it was a tough year, and it was a year that I want to say of recovery. Of course, there were some highlights. It wasn't just all doom and gloom. I was really happy to see traction in our safety plan. It's something that I campaigned on. As you said, we're going into sort of the last part of my term as Premier here in the province. Safety has been a very big call for me, and happy to start to see early signs where the deployment of law enforcement officers in partnership with the city, we're starting to see a reduction in murders. The only place in South Africa where this plan is being implemented, you see that reduction. I think agriculture showed itself to be a good job creator, double-digit figure growth over the last 2 years. And then now, at the end of this year, seeing tourism come back, and now we're starting to see numbers that are actually surpassing, this season now surpassing 2019 tourism numbers. So, yeah, tough year, but I think some very good signs leading into the year to come. But of course, this being the end of a term, we've got to make sure that we follow through on those programs. For me, safety is still a number one priority, even though it's not a mandate of a province. If you can't have safety for your citizens, then you can't get any of the other things right. So we'll continue to focus on it, continue to push for devolution of power. I believe that's what should be happening in South Africa. And we will continue to put extra budget towards it and bring in innovation, bring in data and evidence to determine decision making. And then I think this year to come, it's got to be a focus on energy. The predictions from Eskom is that this year is going to be worse than last year. And I think the impact of the last year of load shedding, the economy has felt it tremendously. So that's also going to be a big focus of mine. Obviously, over and above what we normally do as a government, which is education and health. We've also made some changes in our government, and they'll be implemented from the 1st of April. A department focusing specifically on infrastructure, and a new department focusing specifically on mobility. But yeah, that's the year. It has had its challenges. Of course, we put our hands up and get involved in politics and get involved in trying to make a difference, because we're not shy away from challenges. We need to tackle them head on.
Well, I've got a challenge that obviously we've been monitoring over the last year, and that's the issue around fires in the Western Cape. Only just yesterday, I think there was another fire in Philippi where 200 homes were razed to the ground. We believe one woman lost her life in the process. And this almost has been something that's been on your landscape or horizon over the last 12 to 24 months, if you will, and also speaks to issues of safety. How safe are people that are living in those communities? Is this something on your agenda? I mean, when you talk about safety, you obviously indicated you were dealing with issues around crime and the murder rate dropping in South Africa. But what about the incidence of fire in some of these communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Our disaster management team, I'm extremely proud of them. And so that's at a provincial disaster management arena. That cascades right down to all of our municipalities. In that segment beforehand, you heard about the quick response of our fire teams when a fire does happen. Of course, especially the fires that happen in informal settlements, they really do rush through and destroy so many homes, and we've got to be really quick to respond. As you said, we had one in Philippi yesterday. The day before, we had one in Dunoon. We've also had a couple of fires up on the mountain. This is the fire season. We have aircraft, spotter aircraft, as well as helicopters placed across the province to fight these fires. Disaster management and the way we manage it is critical. We've got to make sure we have budget every single year in place for managing these disasters. And of course, the pressure is on us. As a province, our population growth is huge. In 2021, we grew by an extra 108,000 citizens who moved to this province. And last year, it looks like the number is going to be around about 127,000. So we're under pressure with the amount of resources we've got to keep on investing to make sure that we are ready for disasters like fire, like floods, and natural disasters, which actually are coming thicker and faster because of an impact on climate change. And the Western Cape is also a province that is really susceptible to those fires and floods that come with climate change.
Mr. Winde, my mum always told me that a stitch in time saves 9. Now, you're talking about the ability of the disaster management team to react to the fires. You don't talk about preventing the fires for a start. What's the plan there? And you've also talked about almost 250,000 new citizens moving into Cape Town in the last 2 years. Talk to us about accommodation. What have you done as far as a provision of housing is concerned for those 250,000 inhabitants in the last 2 years?
Yeah. I'll come to housing now. Of course, population growth is a big thing, and you've got to focus. And I think a big problem in government is we don't plan longer than 5-year terms, which has been an issue. And we are busy setting up a much more longer-term vision and future thinking and future planning in our government. I'm using examples from other parts of the world. The one that really stands out for me is the engagements that we've had with Helsinki. Now, we put 5-year plans on the table. They put 5-year alongside a 100-year plan, which is a group of a minimum of 4 to 5 scenarios. And we definitely don't do that in South Africa. We've got to start thinking much longer term. Our province, you talk about population growth, we are due to attract another 1.4 million citizens to our province between now and 2030, so 7 years' time. We really are going to have a lot more population growth. Unfortunately, our budgets don't climb commensurately with that. It takes quite a long time for the division of revenue to change, and that's why we've got to be much more innovative and much smarter. And I said earlier, also changing the way we think. So that's why I've put 2 new departments in place. One of mobility, because these people that come here need to be able to get to work, get to school, get to hospital care facilities, etc. And that talks to mobility. How do people and goods and services move around? We've really got to up our game in thinking about that. And then infrastructure. Our big issue is at the moment in South Africa is energy infrastructure. How do we really ramp that up? Up until now, it's always seen as not a provincial mandate. It's seen as a national mandate. But quite frankly, provinces and local authorities are having to step in a far greater way when it comes to energy provision. You can already see it in Cape Town, where we can mitigate 2 levels of load shedding already. The mayor gave me the indication the other day of the first round of independent power producers that they went out to bid on for 200 megawatts. It looks like they're going to get nearly 500 megawatts. They're going out for a second round again. 3 of the 6 other municipalities are almost ready to go out now again in the province. So that'll be Stellenbosch. It looks like Saldanha Bay as well as Mossel Bay are ready to go out on tender as well, so that we actually look at much more investment into infrastructure to sustain an economic growth trajectory in the province. And then, of course, you talk about human settlements and housing, and there we can't just carry on doing the same thing where, we've got a couple of billion rand every year that we spend on housing. It's nowhere near sufficient to accommodate the nearly 700,000 people that are sitting in the waiting list, in the backlog, and it just grows every single year. So now we're starting to develop higher-rise development in housing. So we've got a pilot project that we ran for 3,500 units in Pinelands, and really has been a huge success, and starting to see volumes come. And in the next year to come, you'll see another 2 or 3 of those high-rise housing settlement investments happening. But of course, also then continuing across the province alongside our municipalities to invest. But we've got to find other ways, and the most important way is actually to get the economy running again, because government cannot provide a home for every single citizen that needs one. It is not sustainable. Our backlog seems to be growing and not shrinking, despite the investment that goes into human settlement. So we've got to make sure that we are gearing up for economic growth, because economic growth really starts to change things. I always say that nothing stops a bullet like a job, nothing puts food on your table like a job, nothing gives you dignity like a job, and nothing gives you an opportunity to look after yourself, put a roof over your head, and create a future for yourself and your family like economic growth and a job does.
Mr. Winde, you've put in place electrical infrastructure to mitigate load shedding, which has obviously been effective to some degree. But I'm going to come back to the issue of housing. If I proffered the opinion that housing, or the provision of housing, has been your Achilles heel in your tenure as Premier, would that be accurate?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think we've got some really great success stories compared to other provinces. Remember that exactly the same division of revenue goes to other provinces as well, and we have to deliver within that mandate. I think that we've really got...
But admittedly, sorry, Mr. Winde, if you'll just allow me to interject very quickly, admittedly, other provinces do not have 250,000 residents moving into their cities every 2 years, if you will. So for purposes of comparison, I don't think you're able to compare yourself to any of the others, particularly because that number might only be maybe you and Gauteng. So what is it looking like? I mean, you've talked about 2,500, 3,500 high-rise apartments in the last year against a figure of 250,000 in 2 years. You know, that's almost insignificant.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I was just talking about one development, which was in Pinelands. I mean, if you go across every municipality, we are busy rolling them out. But the problem is that it's a losing battle. You've got huge influx of citizens, as you said, Gauteng and the Western Cape, and the budgets that come from a central revenue system don't reflect that change. That change, although we fight about the division of revenue on a regular basis, that change takes too long for us to get the correct and commensurate amount of money. So it's very difficult to be judged on human settlements and how that difference is being made, and that's why we've got to try to be innovative. And those are the innovations that I'm talking about, is how we create partnerships, densifications, and then also what is it that actually enables us to create an economy around human settlements that the private sector are willing to get involved in. And the interesting thing for me is at the moment, if you look at the last infrastructure conference that we held in Cape Town at the beginning of last year, and speaking to the private sector investors, that in actual fact the developers who were getting the best return on their money were actually getting their return in places like Khayelitsha. They were getting a 22% return on investment. And how do we enable, through local government, much more private sector partnerships to help us? Otherwise, we'll never get rid of the 600, 700,000 people in the backlog. And many of them have been waiting for many, many years. And of course, as you say, the influx of citizens, which come here because, probably they're coming here because there are better opportunities in the Western Cape to get a job, better opportunities for education, better opportunities for health. And that attracts people. But I mean, I would never like to be in the opposite sort of environment. I'd much rather be a province that attracts risk takers, attracts people to come to this region, because at the same time, it's also attracting investors. It's really good to see sectors of our economy really growing, and they grow on the back of investment.
Now, Mr. Winde, you've obviously had a busy entry into 2023. We know you've been working throughout this period. Now, talk to us about what keeps you up at night.
Well, I suppose the main challenge is safety and energy, because they block the economy and block people finding the ability to live lives that they feel that they want to be able to live in this beautiful province, in this beautiful country. So, those are the things. It's the pressure that our citizens are feeling. And that's why you've got to push our government really hard. I'm excited to see, and I mean, one of the areas, not only human settlements, but we have huge pressure on our education system. And in the last few months, our education system has really been pulling out all the stops. We've got what we call the rapid build system going in place, 7 new schools in 6 months. But overall, we're putting another 842 classrooms. That's 26,000 new places for learners into our school system, because we have so many people coming here for education. And, so you've got to try and find new ways. That's bringing innovative building mechanisms in place that are quick to build, cost effective. And also, I mean, sometimes it takes a bit of risk, so there could be some failures in the system, but if we don't take risk, we're never going to be able to get on top of things. So I'm quite happy that in that space we're pushing boundaries and doing very well. I was on site with a number of them on the building sites now in the last month. Again, it's going to be, as you said, it hasn't stopped this season. I'm really excited about the tourism numbers. We have 192 direct flights coming in to Cape Town International Airport a week at the moment. You could feel the system across our coastal towns and our city of Cape Town. They are buzzing at the moment, and that's all really bodes very well for recovery, getting those jobs back, that we can actually start pushing the unemployment rate down further.
Now, when you talk about 192 flights coming through to Cape Town, it's a significant number, and the tourists obviously bringing in much needed foreign currency into the Western Cape. Does this trickle down to the township economy or the SMMEs, for instance? How can they benefit from this influx of tourism in the Western Cape?
I think if of any sector in the economy, tourism, well, let's say tourism and agriculture are the two sectors that really have the biggest trickle-down effect, because, it's from the Uber driver to the baker who's baking croissants that are being delivered to the hotels, to the tour guides, to the ice cream vendor, but right down to the guy who's producing or selling cabbages that are being bought by the hotel groups. Tourism really does have a very broad base of affecting change. And that's why during the lockdown period and during COVID-19, we had such a huge negative impact, because those small businesses were the ones that really took pain. And you saw those businesses failing, and you saw them unable to keep their staff employed. Now you're seeing them come back, and definitely that is very much a broad-based employer. It also, tourism has the ability, it's not only the big companies, it employs people with lower levels of qualification and easy access into an economy that actually ramps up and builds up very, very quickly. So it's a critical part of our overall economy and a key part of recovery, and that's why these numbers are really, really important to me. We passed the 7 million the 7 million passenger mark at our airport in the beginning of December, and I think we're going to go past the 8 million very, very soon, once again, by the volume of people coming in and out. The cruise line terminal is working flat out. I've just come from the launch of the Cape to Rio yacht race, and 2 cruise liners coming into the terminal, turning around with new passengers going out again. We've got about 120 cruise liners booked through Cape Town and some of our other ports around the province this year and this sort of summer season, which really bodes well. And these are the quick generators of jobs. At the same time, I'm also really encouraged by the tech sector, and I think COVID-19 launched our tech sector. If I look at the online shopping, what happened is we were around 4% of sales were delivered to people's homes. It's now got to 27%. Wow. And I look at the fintech companies that are growing out of this region. So many of them would start and go to Silicon Valley or to Europe, and so many of them are now staying here and building up. We've got about 450 tech companies based here, from those small startups right to the Amazons, the big companies, and they've all in the last few years been investing hundreds of millions, in actual fact billions and billions into the economy.
Well, you certainly seem to be in an exciting space, Mr. Winde. Now, we did talk, or you did mention comparison to other provinces, and the one area that I'd certainly like us to talk about is service delivery, which has been up to naught in most provinces. Now, there are allegations that the haves in Cape Town get much better service delivery than the have-nots. Your comment on service delivery as a whole in the Western Cape, and certainly, are you entitled, or are you guaranteed better service delivery when you are a have versus a have-not?
Well, I sincerely hope that every single one of our service delivery points, be they at local government or at provincial government level, do not distinguish between a have or have-not. And I mean, when it comes to the province and our service delivery, our main service is education and health, and that definitely is spread across the province. And in actual fact, the investment into health and education is by far 80% of it goes into regions that are considered poorer rather than richer. That's where our mandate lies and where our budget goes. And of course, whether you are where or how you receive that service, I sincerely hope that across the board, wherever it is, it's getting better and better. I have implemented, well, I've always had every first Thursday is open across this province, and we have it at our parliament level, and we move it out to different regions of the province where every minister, every head of department, and myself is available to the public. Walk in, no appointment needed, because it's about accessibility and understanding where those pressure points are, and then being able to respond to them. Over and above that is, how do we understand what those points are, and on that site. So, where those pressure points are, we've got to try to make sure that those services improve, that the budget goes towards where those pressure points are.
Western Cape Premier Alan Winde, appreciate your time.